Hello, everyone. Thank you guys for joining us. This is Team 4. This is our final project. My name is Jacob Perry. I will be the introductory presenter for our project, our data analytic project on endocrine system diseases we'll be focusing on tonight. As an introduction, just a little bit of background on endocrine system diseases specifically. Endocrine system is it's a part of the human anatomy, and its diseases and disorders associated with it can affect the body in a lot of different aspects, in different ways, in different parts. And these, while many of these diseases are lived with by medical patients, many of them unfortunately can suffer fatal outcomes by these diseases. And because of that high stakes nature of these diseases, we wanted to contribute a little bit of conversation and dialogue along with some visualizations to kind of focus on where clinical trials are at in all phases of those trials, using Tableau as a visualization tool. And we focused on a lot of studies that were conducted in New York State and abroad. As an overview, we kind of focus mostly on the main ones, which is diabetes type 1 and type 2 mellitus. These are probably the two leading the charge in terms of disease, the effective diseases on global health and on an international level. We analyzed clinical trial data, and this allowed for us to get a better insight as to where improvements are needed, and to pull out and snuff out any correlations or patterns that are trending, or trends that we found within the clinical trial data. Glands and hormones are kind of the focus of the endocrine system. These are the parts of the human anatomy that are most affected by these diseases. The list of diseases that are most affected by endocrine system the endocrine system disorders are going to be diabetes mellitus, as mentioned before, thyroid disorders, adrenal disorders, pituitary disorders, osteoporosis, polycystic ovary syndrome, and metabolic syndrome, along with other disorders alike. In the next slide I'm going to show is going to be it's a visualization developed to kind of focus on where mortality rates are. This was not from clinical trial data. This was pulled from the World Health Organization. And as you can see, there is no region or part of the international community that's unaffected by endocrine system diseases. Basically, every corner on Earth and every region is affected pretty drastically by these diseases, as food surplus and other overconsumptive items have been made available across time. As you can see here on the dark green, the EU, the European continent, is very deeply affected by endocrine system diseases, along with, as you can see, Asia is also deeply impacted. But across the board, you can tell that it is a global effort to try to combat these disorders and diseases with clinical trial data and improvements in medical treatment. So with that, I'm going to kick to the next presenter. Farhan's going to talk a little about process and our analytic process. So go right ahead.
Hello, everyone. My name is Farhan. I'm going to be talking about how the data that we used was collected, organized, analyzed, and visualized. As for collecting the data, we used clinicaltrials.gov, and the search keywords that we used are endocrine system diseases, New York State, and completed. To narrow down our focus and to ensure the quality of our project, the data fields that we chose are condition, interventions, phases, enrollment, study type, and location. Next slide. When we were organizing the clinical trials data, our goal was to separate different endocrine system disorders into different groups, as it allowed us to concentrate on identifying trends and findings specific to each condition. Also, separating the data by phases allowed us to find out the current stage of the treatment in the trial process, and also how developed the research is for each disease. Next slide. In order to analyze the data, we applied descriptive statistics and inferential statistics for different scenarios. For example, when we wanted to determine which diseases and the trials have the most participants, we used descriptive statistics. And when we wanted to identify the relationship between intervention types and results of the trials, we applied chi-square tests. Next slide. In order to visualize our data, we utilized a very productive software called Tableau. Tableau enabled us to easily create interactive charts and graphs, manage our data set, and discover various trends and patterns through a visual investigation. We also were allowed to produce various forms of visualization, such as pie charts, bar charts, text charts, that made it easier for us to compare and contrast our data and to have a better visual organization. Now I'm going to be passing on to our next presenter, Nick. He's going to be going through our visualizations.
Thank you, Farhan. I'm Nick. I'm here to talk about visualizations 1 and 2. So visualization 1 shows the number of completed adult interventional clinical trials funded by the NIH. Endocrine diseases of which interventional clinical trials were most funded by the NIH were things such as type 1 diabetes and mellitus, with 33 clinical trials listed as NIH funded, pancreatic cancer, 26 clinical trials listed as NIH funded, type 2 diabetes and mellitus, with 30 clinical trials listed as NIH funded, and ovarian cancer with 8 clinical trials listed as NIH funded. Now, these are the most funded because they affect people the most and things like that. And if we go to the next slide, we will see a visualization in the enrollment in phase 1 and 2 clinical trials for endocrine disorders in female patients under 17 years of age. Now, this was filtered by complete phase of clinical trials, phase 1 and phase 2, filtered by female patients under 17 years of age. The bar graph indicates higher cases of type 1 non-mellitus diabetes in phase 1. Phase 2 indicates similar rates of type 1 non-mellitus diabetes. Records indicate a higher diagnosis of solid malignant tumor diagnosis in phase 2 trials under these patient conditions. And this was made using Tableau, using some tooltips to try and filter out null data. And if we pass it on to Mone, she will continue with the visualizations.
Hello, my name is Mone, and I will go over the visualization number 3 to number 5. The pie chart here shows the distribution of clinical trials in different phases. Phase 3 trials makes up the biggest part of the pie chart, indicating a focus on final stage studies to confirm if treatments work and are safe for a large group of people. The second largest part is phase 2, which shows there is a middle phase of research testing new treatments for the first time. Phase 3 trials are the third largest on the chart, focusing on early safety and dosage test. Phase 4, which is post-marketing studies, also makes up a big part, indicating that there is continued monitoring after treatment is available to the public. Next slide, please. Interventions. Insulin glargine appears most often in the data, showing up 8 times. This may imply that insulin is a common choice for treatment in this particular medical or research environment, as it appears often in data. Insulin glargine is a medicine used for diabetes. It helps rise insulin in your body to lower blood sugar levels. It's a type of long-lasting insulin. Usually it's used together with changes in diet and exercise. The appearance of placebo on the list indicates that some of the liquors may come from controlled clinical trials where a placebo group is necessary for comparison with the drug being tested. The treatment in data include both particular medication and broad group like vitamin. This diverse mix suggests the dataset might cover a broad scope of clinical research or various patient histories. Next slide. Condition versus interventions. This graph provides an overview of the different type of intervention used in various conditions. This time we will delve into a condition that has been researched the most among the others. The interventions listed are various drugs used in the clinical trials. The most commonly used interventions methods are insulin degludec, semaglutide, and liraglutide. Insulin degludec is an artificial form of long-lasting insulin. It functions by taking over the role of natural insulin in the body, assisting in the transfer of sugar from the bloodstream to various body tissues for energy. Additionally, it prevents the liver from generating excess sugar. Semaglutide is used for the treatment of type 2 diabetes and long-term weight management. It helps the pancreas release insulin when blood sugar is high. Liraglutide exerts its insulin secretory and other effects only when blood glucose levels are high and has clinically significant hypoglycemic effect. And now I'll hand it over to Maya, who will go over the conclusion.
Thank you, Mone. So just to wrap up and reflect on the data we presented to you today, the first visualization highlighted 4 endocrine diseases that were funded by the National Institute of Health. So while all these diseases are very important to research, type 1 diabetes had the highest number of funded clinical trials, which just indicates how much of a public health burden it is. The second one highlighted how we filtered the similar and differing rates of endocrine diseases in females under the age of 17. This was really highlighting how we can focus in on a large set of data using Tableau as well. The third visualization shows the different phases that were conducted to assess the safety and effectiveness of new treatments. Phase 3 was the largest segment in this visualization, which indicates that it's the most extensive testing phase for effectiveness and safety in a large population. And the fourth one highlights how insulin is commonly utilized in intervention measures when treating various endocrine system diseases. And lastly, the fifth one really focused in on insulin being the primary intervention for type 2 diabetes, as well as semaglutide. Move to the next slide. In conclusion, the endocrine system is vulnerable to a range of diseases and disorders. Through the utilization of data visualization tools like Tableau, we can gain insight from studies conducted both locally in New York State and globally. These visualizations serve to compartmentalize and simplify correlations and trends within these conditions, which in turn aids healthcare professionals further their research and treatment responses. This also enhanced our understanding of endocrine diseases through data analysis and visualizations, which can contribute to improved patient care and outcomes, which will potentially save lives. That concludes our presentation, and we thank you for your time.